the second question is unrelated to the first. And so the questioner asks this. He says, at some point in time, we realize that death is a reality and spiritual progress is still at an early stage. A sense of anxiety creeps in then. One way, it's good that one loses interest in material comforts, and at the same time, anxiety continues. How did we deal with this phase of life? This is the question. So let's break this question down a little bit. So at some point in time, we realize that death is a reality. Well, yes, in most cases, that some point in time is triggered by somebody else's death. Or as you get older, you realize all your friends are disappearing. And sometime or other, yes, it's going to happen to you. But that moment is replaced by a kind of diversion which says that let's not bother about it. Let's put that as a skeleton in the closet and we'll deal with it much later. We'll postpone that. We'll procrastinate on that issue. And so these insights are, unfortunately, periodic, spasmodic. So we have to much more than that realize, not that death becomes a reality and what a pity. We have to see, as in the first questions, that it can be a great advantage. You see, the thing is that every person who's dying, and Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, a medical doctor who is a specialist in death and dying, will verify this for us, that every person who slips away from the mortal life, that person knows that they're dying and accepts it. More importantly, accept it. And that moment of acceptance is a happy moment for the person. And we have enough evidence from near-death experiences to see how death is a very positive experience, not a negative one. But the questioner is saying that at some point we realize that death is a reality. Yes, at some point, even though the point may move on. And then spiritual progress is still at an early stage. Well, spiritual progress is not linear. It's not like a build-up in our skills. In a sense, of course, it is, but it's not a career path pattern. Spiritual progress occurs when we see evidence in ourselves that all the compulsions that we had are all now transformed, that our whole life is essentially joyful and peaceful. The transformation in spiritual progress, as it were, goes hand in hand with noticing a shift in our character. Noticing that we are not affected so much by things, by pairs of opposites, praise and blame, hot and cold, good and bad. These are positive poles in nature that normally would affect us, based on the fact that we have developed a strategy of individuality against overwhelming odds. And when we shift that and say, no, actually, we can catch a unity of experience. We can catch an overall experience where we understand, truly understand, the unity of existence. And when we get closer to that, there's an opening. You see, the more we think and feel in a devotional way about the profound nature of ourself that religion calls God, the less we become attached to the world. And that includes the physical body. And that includes all the things that support it. And that includes all the descriptions of oneself that one has when we ignore our true nature. And even ignore our personality traits that we don't like others to see. When we become ultimately childlike, when we become more joyful, when we become more accepting, and principally, above all else, when we become indiscriminately loving, when our sense of criticism goes away, when we feel more whole. These are measures of spiritual progress, and each one will have their different measure. And it boils down really to the central difficulty that we have, namely our sense of egoism, which comes with a sense of self-image, which comes with a compulsion, which comes with a certain upbringing that is developed from a defense mechanism that we had, a strategic planning orientated around survival. This has developed our egoistic tendency, and this becomes a cornerstone for each one of us of our personality. Persona means mask, and personality, well, mask, there's something behind it. When we no longer attend or identify with the mask primarily, and more with that which stands behind it, we can see this shift as spiritual progress, and each one can see it for themselves. Now, supposing you say, but I'm about to die, let's say in 2 weeks' time, and my spiritual progress is less. Supposing a doctor tells you you only have 2 weeks to live. Well, one reaction to it, a very common reaction would be to go and spend all your money and complete what people call your bucket list. Go on holiday, or reconcile with people that you love, or any manner of these things. The second one, of course, is much more compassionate. The first one is much more selfish. But all of it is really toward this forgetfulness of our true nature and this orientation around a single body-mind complex, an orientation around a prophet-actor complex. And when that starts to diminish, then there's a commensurate understanding of our spiritual progress. But even a measurement of this progress really is a witnessed moment. And all these moments are within a field, mental field, intellectual field, physical field, and indicate, of course, that there is a witness behind that. When cognition of this witness becomes stronger, then our concern with the world becomes less. It happens automatically. And so, if you have a panic moment, 2 weeks to live, and I haven't really accomplished freedom, what will happen in the future? Will I be reborn as an insect or something? Or I don't know, any manner of anxieties. And anxieties around that will be also to do with, are my affairs in order and all kinds of things. Or will people talk about me kindly? I don't know, I will never know this because the physical presence is gone. Just as it goes every night in a dress rehearsal for death, where we vacate our normal working, waking personality, and our passport self disappears, and we get a new identity, as it were, multiple identities called dream and dream figures. And we play nicely in that, and when you slip into a deep, deep sleep, where none of these characteristics are in evidence, and no passport was required to glide across the border of any of these things. It just happens naturally. And we sit in a contented moment, and we register it later as, I was so peaceful, because there was no duality in it. There was no second person to fight with or complain about. There was no second person at all to agree or disagree with, or even to converse with. Everything is peaceful. So with this attitude, is this not a death? The vacation of our working, waking self, our normal sort of core personality that we say is normal, where we evaluate all these other states from the advantage point of and distorted point of the waking state, not seeing that each state of consciousness has the same kind of values, that is, appearance and disappearance. But for that moment in time, we are close to the divine. For that moment in time, we're close to prajna. We're close to that shining one that one which is pure consciousness, we are close to. A small separation there, just for the time being, we are close to God. And the witness of it, that is that transcendent aspect that is always there. And knowing it is our freedom. And spiritual progress, of course, is not the language we would then use. Spiritual progress, if we say, I'm not there yet, then that's not spiritual progress at all. It is thinking that we have to struggle uphill. And struggling uphill is the beginning of spiritual life. But as spiritual life develops more and more, the struggle for it becomes less and less. It becomes easy, it becomes natural. And the faith that we have at that moment will be that all of nature, again, is in our favor, and that there's a flow of nature pushing us forward from within and pulling us from without. Inevitably, every single atom will find its own freedom. And the confidence about this and the warmth of feeling that a child has that they are secure and protected will not even think about progress, not think in this language of progress. It's simply tuning into what is here and what is now. Because spiritual progress is a future term, just as negative situations is a past term. Any form of language that involves the word progress is future orientated. And in future orientation and past orientation, there's one thing that we are missing: the current presence of our own spirituality here and now. Right here, right now, is what we are. When we discover it, even for a moment, we abandon any idea of progress. We're simply tuning into what is there. A person walks around with their glasses on their head. Oh, have you seen my glasses? No, it's there already. It's there already, you didn't notice it. What you call freedom is there already. When you look out of the window and measure, is the Lord coming? Am I having a divine vision today? And if not, why not? Look out of the window. Is he coming? Is he coming? No. No, shift your position. And when you shift your position, you reside in the eternal now. And that is real attunement. At that point, there's no past, there's no future. At that point, there's a present. And when we cultivate that, we are starting to live in the eternal presence. In this way, we call this spiritual progress. So, the second question, let me see if I can clarify it further. A sense of anxiety creeps in. Anxiety only comes with future orientation. Drop your sense of your future orientation, the anxiety goes. And to lose interest in material comforts, well, that's an automatic thing that happens. It happens automatically. In the beginning, it happens as spiritual practice, as a sadhana. That's the struggle part. We deliberately try to exercise our will. What is tapasya? What is sadhana? What is spiritual effort? What is spiritual practice? What is austerity? It is simply the strengthening of the will part of the mind. That you can direct your will in any direction that you want. Will, I want to do something. Will and want, same thing. Strengthening your sense of will, in other words, strengthening the capacity to take your attention and steer it as you deliberately want, whatever way you want, but in such a way that it is completely positive. Okay, so I hope I answered that question for you. So we have another few minutes to go, 15 minutes or so, and maybe I'll pause. Maybe there's some other comments or questions that you might want to make. Oh, you see how you're taking on board this practicing the presence. And what I have just described, of course, is exactly that, practicing the presence. But the presence is right here, right now. So we cannot think of spiritual life as time goes on. In the beginning, we can think of it as, oh, I have to do something. There's a progress, there's a struggle, there's some discipline involved. I have to do this, I have to do that. That's fine, of course. But at some point in time, there'll be a registration. Are there some gaps that need to be filled? Do I have to now think that life is imperfect, I'm imperfect, and I have to improve that? Two approaches are there. The one approach is to say, I am defective from the very word go. I'm unworthy, I'm undeserving, I'm defective, I'm a worm, I'm a sinner. And things have to be improved. And this attitude has been adopted, this sense of correcting an inherent imperfection has carried through to medical life, the physical, it is carried through to psychological life, it's carried through to all of these things designed to remedy something, some fault which is there. That's the one perspective. But the other perspective will be, and this is the Vedantic perspective, well, some corrections no doubt have to be there, but they're all to do with removing obstacles because what is already there is full and free and perfect. And we simply have to uncover the perfection which is already there. Be perfect as your Father in heaven. Jesus makes this statement, and many theologians have found some objections to this, trying to work out what did Jesus mean. But it's quite plain. Be perfect as your Father in heaven. If the possibility wasn't there, he wouldn't have said it. Now, it's not that we are striving for perfection. It's that we are uncovering the perfection of the kingdom of heaven, which is already there. The kingdom of heaven is within it. It's not, lo, it is here, lo, it is there. It is within it, within you. So I always use this example, isn't it, of a scenario where you're living in a city and there's a prominent visitor, maybe it's King Charles, the new king, come to visit, and so the city spruces itself up. It whitewashes over all the graffiti, it hides all the heroin addicts, it puts up all the flags. Everything is clean, no rubbish on the streets, everything is wonderful and perfect. Mind you, maybe only in that area where the king is traveling. Never mind. Now, supposing I've been abroad and I come to the city and I have no idea, I've just heard something about the king visiting. My question is, if the king visits and stays, is it that we take all the flags down? Is it that we put the graffiti back? Is it that we put all the rubbish back on the streets? No. If the streets are clean, it's either that the king is about to come or the king is here already. And so we have to try and replace this attitude. Things are about to happen. Revelation will come in the future. Look out the window. Is the king here? No, no, no. When is he arriving? Anxiously waiting for him. Or is the king here already? And I simply keep the polishing up because the fact that the king is here, I'll do the polishing. The fact that the king is here, I'll do the cleaning. The fact that it's here, I will do all that, not to get something, but because the king is here already, honoring the king already. Not an anxious expectation, is the king to come. So we have to adopt this attitude. At some point in spiritual life, the effort, the prayer, and all the requests, make me better, make me good, make me more deserving. Please save me. The saving attitude gets replaced on the basis that there are no gaps or holes anywhere in the universe. It was our mistake to think that things were defective and had to be improved. Not at all. Things are perfect, full, and free, and by tuning into that here and now, And whenever that tuning goes off, we call this negative. We call this painful. We call this disturbing. We call this difficulties. We call this problems. It's only wrong tuning. I can tune it back again. The broadcast waves are always there. Wind of God's grace is always flowing. Why don't I set my sail? Why don't I make a tuning? A small, subtle movement, which again sets me back on a course of steadiness. All of spiritual life is doing that, making that adjustment. And that requires observing at any moment in time, what condition is the mind? What waves are currently dominating in the mind that are likely to upset my boat? And why don't I put calming waves in instead? Why don't I put counter waves in? As soon as I find a negative rising up in my mind, why don't I put a positive? So that is the secret of positive thinking. In the 1960s and so on, and even up to now, there's a great, great emphasis on what is called positive thinking. And fortunately, that has also been supplemented by a concern for mindfulness. It's a social progression. So what do we mean by positive thinking? Ultimately, it doesn't mean just countering a negative with a positive. How do we do that? When we turn on the news on the radio and, or the television or whatever it is, and hear only bad news, nothing more than bad news, then how can we possibly struggle to find anything positive in life? You see, you have the wrong approach. The right approach will be to revalue this scenario and look at it from a very different point of view, not a standard approach. Find a different creative approach to view the world. And the new and creative approach is to say, the whole of everything is pure spirit. There is nothing more here except spirit. And it is not only spirit, but that spirit, when I tune into it, has the quality, if you will, or the substantial essence of beauty and peace and harmony. I want to be harmonious. Why don't I tune into that? Why do I look for something in the world to make me feel better, more joyful? Because that will lead you to a materialistic understanding of the material correlation with pleasure. It is not found in the objects. It is found in taking the consciousness that normally flows out of the senses toward the objects and bringing it inward. So a few people managed to do this, say the Upanishads. Instead of taking that energy and moving it outwards toward the objects that give us problems, why don't we bring it inwards and stand in a poised moment of potential creativity where we now create the objects, where we now create the situations, where we make our own scenes, where we conduct our own creations, our own productions, our own plays, where we ourselves are happy to continue being a player. Well, I think time is nearly finished. If there are no further questions, we can leave it at that.
Thank you, Swamiji.
Okay, all good, all good.
Thank you, Swami.
All right, so love and blessings to you. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. Peace, peace, peace be unto all.
Guru Mahagat.
Guru Mahagat.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Swami. Thank you.